In order to show you some of the features of logging and integration services, I'm going to create a destination table in the AdventureWorks database. And then I'll open an existing package that's included with this course's sample files and make sure that it's properly configured for my environment, because I created this package on a different machine. And so I need to make sure that it's going to work here, just like you would need to do if you're going to run the package. And then I'm going to run it, make sure it's configured correctly, and then enable some simple log events. The package that I'm going to work with reads flat text files from the source data directory and then imports the data from each into a database table. Okay, so I'm here in Management Studio. Here's a script that is going to create that products table. So I'm going to use the AdventureWorks 2012 database, just happens to be a convenient database container for this. I'm going to drop the table if it exists, and then create a table that has fields for each of the rows of data within those flat files. All right, so I'll go ahead and execute that, and the table now exists. Now I'll go over to SQL Server Data Tools, and I have this logging project open that has this logging package. All right, so the first thing I need to do is make sure that the data connection is valid. So I'll come down here to the Connection Manager. It's going against the local server. Windows authentication is fine. AdventureWorks 2012. All looks good. I can test the connection. Succeeded, and so I'm good. So most common change I need to make there is probably the authentication. Use SQL Server authentication instead of Windows authentication if that's what I need to use in my environment. Okay, next thing I need to do is configure this for each loop container to make sure that it's going to read the files from the correct location. So it's currently set there. I'll browse to that location. Come down here into sample files. Let's see, error handling, yep, okay. And the source data, that looks good. And I'll click OK just to make sure. And the file mask is star.txt. That all looks good. Okay, but I could have put those source files in a different location, but now the for each loop container knows where to find those, and it'll be able to find the data. Okay, then I'm going to double click on the data flow task. And the main thing here is just to make sure that neither of the data source or the data destination have any kind of error icon. If it does, then I would need to configure them. Most likely it means that it's looking for the flat files in the wrong place, or is looking to put the data into a table that doesn't exist. But everything looks fine there, so should be good to go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and execute the package just to make sure that it executes successfully. Loads it up. All right, see there's 38 rows that were processed. Go back over to the control flow. Everything looks good. I can now go over to Management Studio and go down into that database. And there's that products table. I can select the top 1,000 rows and can see that there we go. It's doing a select against all of it, and I ended up with 256 rows of data. Okay, that all looks good. By the way, if you come back over here and look at the data flow, it says that there were only 38 rows of data, yet we have 256 in the table. Well, the reason for that is because the control flow is in this for each loop container. And so the control flow is going to execute this data flow task for each of the flat files in that folder, of which there are 4. And so this number here in the data flow only shows the value for the very last file that was processed. Okay? Now, if you need to know more about this, you can use a row count in order to record that information and get more precise information. But in this case, the proof is just in the fact that we have 256 rows that ended up in the table. So we're good. Okay, so let's go back over to Data Tools and End Execution. And I'm going to come up here to SSIS and notice that there's a couple of logging related entries. One is logging, whoops, and I'll talk about that shortly. But then the other one is log events. And what that does is that opens up this log events window, which is by default docked to the left side of the screen here. Now if I can select that and widen it, you can see that this is potentially going to be a list of events that are logged. Okay, and it's empty because I haven't yet recorded any log entries. Now, in order to configure logging, I need to come up and actually I need to select the package for this to be available, and select this logging option, which opens up this Configure SSIS Logs Logging dialog box. I'm going to expand the for each loop container, and as you can see, I have a data flow task that is selected. Okay, but what this is this is a hierarchy of the objects within this package. It's a very simple package. I have the package itself, a single task in the control flow, and then a single data flow component contained within the container. Obviously, it would be much more extensive a hierarchy here if this was a more complex, more realistic package. Okay, I want to enable logging across all of the levels of this, so I'll select all those. Oh, and actually I don't want to select that. Okay. So you can select where logging occurs by judiciously selecting or deselecting those checkboxes. Okay, with logging selected, I'm going to come over here to the Details tab, which lets me select the events that are going to be logged for the container. So for this example, I want to log on error, on information, and on pipeline rows sent. Okay, nothing magical about selecting those. This is going to give us a reasonable amount of log entries when I run the package again. All right, that's all I need to do at this point, so I'll select OK. And then I'll execute the package once again. Go out, read the data, put it in the database, everything executed successfully, all looks good. And I'll end execution. And now notice that I have a ton of data here within this log events window. All right, so I have a name on pre-validate on various things. You can see the computer name here. That's not really relevant. The operator, it's my user who I'm logged in as. Actually, if I go wider there, you can see that it's me. And then it identifies the source. So in this case, a bunch from the data flow task, but there's from the logging package itself. It has the GUIDs of the source and the execution GUID. There's a message, validation phase, rows, pre-execute, execute phase, rows are being processed, cleanup, validation. You can see everything that is going on within this package. And keep in mind that I just selected 3 different events. I could select a whole lot more, in which case I'd get a lot more information. In particular, you can see things like, if I widen this enough here, if I had more screen resolution, it'd be a little bit easier to see all this stuff. So you can see that one of the events that's logged is that the processing of the file, C, sample files, blah, 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 blue.txt has started. And so you can track through this just how everything executed within the package. It's an awful lot of detail, and really you need to play with using the different events on what you capture to see what's most useful for diagnosing and solving different kinds of problems. But you can see you get a lot of information, and you can look at the order of things in which they occur and glean a lot of information to solve many kinds of problems with packages that you might encounter.